Good morning, John Kinsella. Thanks for joining us here at Yellow Shelf.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be with you.
It's a pleasure. I know it's morning for you. I'm on the other side of the country here in Australia, so it's a little afternoon for me. But John, first of all, congratulations on your book, Beam of Light Stories. Anyone who knows John Kinsella knows that you are a prolific author. Way too many books to list here. So congratulations. What do we need to know about your newest book, Beam of Light Stories?
Beam of Light, as you say, is a collection of stories. I mean, I'm probably best known as a poet, but I've written 8 collections of stories. So this is the most recent, and actually the one I'm most passionate about. Probably of my other collections, the other one I feel strongly about is called Crow's Breath. Um, but this book is quite different. It's they're relatively short stories, 6, 7 pages. Some are longer, but basically they're kind of glimpses into people's lives. I really like stories that capture a moment or an event or an incident, and allow us to sort of see beyond what we get in the story. So hopefully it opens up cracks and fissures and ways of seeing. So yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this one. It covers a lot of the sort of interests and themes that obsess and occupy my thinking, especially, it's an anti-colonial book. It's very much a book that deals with toxic masculinity and deals with all the kind of aggressive ecology around masculinity in general. It's also very much about the rural. I live in, a rural place. I live in the bush, in fact, like literally. I look outside, I'm looking at trees and so on. And it's also international in its scope as well. There are stories set in Ireland.
Yes.
There are stories, there's a story set in Greece. There's one set in Germany and so on. Places I've lived around the world. So it's local and focused on one level, so rural Western Australia, it's also international as well. So all those things.
Yeah. And look, there's there's so many short stories in this. And I had a personal favorite simply because I could relate. It was the ballet class, being a ballet dancer and also now being a mother who drops off a child at ballet. So I mean, I'd recommend there's so many different stories. And like you said, it's definitely got an international flavor. John, you probably touched on what inspired you to write this particular book and the short stories in it. But what do we know about John? And for anyone watching who has no idea who John Kinsella is, what do you want to tell us about you?
Well, I'm an anarchist vegan pacifist. I have a deep political sense of responsibility in the world. I've been an environmental activist for 40 years. I read my poetry in front of bulldozers, quite literally. I feel very, very impassioned to try and encourage positive change with regard to environment, human rights, and justice issues. Um, Probably the most important component of all is the pacifism bit, because I strongly believe that change can come only through not replicating the violences of the world. My stories look at violence a great deal. I mean, I've been sober for 30 years, but before that, I was an alcoholic and so on, and I lived in a very, very different world from the one I live in now, and I saw a lot of I suppose you'd say negative energy, for want of a better expression, and was part of that and caused mayhem and chaos to my loved ones as well as to myself. So I've got a very strong motivation to kind of look at the world and look at all the complexities, contradictions and violences and so on, and try and find another way through. My stories don't ever tell you what to think. I'm very strong about that because I am an activist, and I speak very often about issues that I feel strongly about. In my fiction, I want to do something quite different. I want to show characters working things out themselves or not. I don't want to tell you, the reader, what to think. I want you to find your own way through. So I suppose if I'm talking about myself, I'm a very impassioned person. I want to bring positive change in the world. My poetry is very much activist poetry. I go out trying to save the environment, and to resist colonialism and these kinds of things, but and to act as an advocate for Indigenous rights and the things I feel passionately about. In my stories, what I try and do is show many different kinds of people interacting, and for you, the reader, to work out the weirdness
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. And John, what's the best way to connect with you? So I'll put some links in the show notes about the best ways to get the book even globally. But yeah, what if we're curious about John? How do we connect?
Oh, well, obviously with this particular book, it's out with Transit Lounge, and they've got a good website. You can go
Yeah.
and find it there. I keep a blog, Mutually Said, with my partner Tracy Ryan, and that's vegan, anarchist, pacifist, and feminist,
Okay.
and is very much orientated towards sort of presenting activist poetry and talking about activism in the world and so on, and occasional little personal snippets in there as well.
Yeah.
But generally, you can find me through basically looking ecological activism and so on. I'm there. I'm
Yeah.
around. I'm pretty active. So I'm not hard to find.
Fabulous. Well, John, thanks so much for joining us today. John, I'm going to be cheeky and ask you, are there any more books in the work or any ideas?
Oh yeah, no, I'm always working. I mean, as you say, I am prolific. It's a bit prolific with a purpose, I hope,
Yeah.
because I don't ever just write for the sake of writing. I mean, I write every day of my life. It's been with me since I was sort of 4 or 5 years old, literally,
Yeah.
quite literally. So writing is an active part of my life, but I write for a purpose.
Yeah.
I consider myself an activist writer. I do it for a purpose. And at the moment, I'm working on a new book of poetry, as I usually am, but I've been working on speculative, fabulous stories lately. I'm really interested in science fiction, always have been, and I thought that I'd make a radical departure. My story collections across the years have speculative, and
Yeah.
they're all full of uncanny and weird stories anyway.
Yeah.
As I mentioned to someone the other day, an uncanny realism, if you like. So I also write quite realist stories that are odd. But what I'm doing now is venturing more into speculative fiction. I've written speculative novels in the past,
Yeah.
but a book of a collective kind of approach to speculative fiction. So that's where I'm at the
Yeah.
moment, and involved in my usual activisms.
Fabulous. Well, you sound like a very busy man, John, and you're always welcome back here on Yellow Shelf.
Thank
If
you.
there's more books in the future, we'd love to have you back and to
Oh,
be
it's
able to
nice to be with
share.
you. That's great.
Yeah. John, thanks so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too, and everyone out there. Bye.
Cheers.